Hello, I am thirteene doing another video for Squirrel Dealers. We're doing more cheeky things tonight. It's my curse. I want to do fun things, and I think that tonight kind of qualifies. We're going to be playing a twist on the Dragons of Tarkir Blue Devotion list for Theros Dragon Standard. I actually really love this deck, but it was only legal for like a week and a half while we were waiting for the core set to come out. And I've always wanted to touch it again. So we're going to be doing some cheeky stuff here. I have one dream tonight, and this is it. Risen Reef will trigger anytime it or another elemental enters the battlefield. You gotta look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it into play tapped. If you don't, it goes to your hand. Then we have Shore Crasher Elemental. It was supposed to be a twist on Aetherling, and it wasn't quite good enough. But it's 3 pips. Pips are the converted mana cost, so it's going to add 3 to your devotion. It's also an elemental. You can exile it to keep it alive. You can grow or shrink its power and toughness, depending on if you need a fat butt or a small butt. Then Megamorph is kind of weird. By the time that you Megamorph this, it ends up being a 4/4 base. Honestly, the 3 pips and the elemental is the core part of this. And then last but not least, we're rocking Master of Waves. So first and foremost, I do want to comment that Merfolk was my first modern deck. It was a little too turn creatures sidewaysy for me, but yeah, it was my first creature deck, and we have a lot of Merfolk in this list. We have a couple elementals. Master of Waves is doing a couple of things here. First and foremost, it's a lord for our elementals, so our elementals get stronger. And then when it enters the battlefield, we end up creating a bunch of 1/0 blue elemental creature tokens equal to the number of pips on the battlefield. So with a Shore Crasher elemental and a Risen Reef, that's going to be 5, including the Master of Waves himself. The Master of Waves lords the token, so they end up being 2/1s while the Master of Waves is in play. But each token is actually going to trigger Risen Reef. That's the Golden Knight. I want that to happen once. But hopefully it's all power level to actually accomplish something. Beyond that, we are playing kind of a similar style to the blue tempo list. We have 4 copies of Tempest Gen, just evasive flyer. We're going to have mostly islands in our deck, but 3 blue pips. Merfolk Trickster to tap stuff down, buy some time to get up to our bigger stuff and actually hitting a large board state. Harbinger of the Tides. We won't, unfortunately, be able to put this in off an Aether Vial like they do in Modern, but Trickster can tap something down. Harbinger can return it to our opponent's hand. And then we are running 4 copies of Collected Company. So our top end is the Master of Waves and Collected Company. We have multiple 3-drops that we want to hit. Marleaf Pixie is a weird blue devotion mana dork that we can hit. Embodiment of Spring is also going to help keep us alive to hit our 4-drops, as well as being able to potentially ramp us. And that is the deck. We are running 4 copies of Tidebinder Mage in the side. Like I said, we have a ton of Merfolk. We have a fun of Thassa in the deck just because she's really good, and she can also make it so that our Tempest Gens are evasive. We do have a couple of copies of Hinterland Harbor just to kind of help with our mana there, and that's going to be a little awkward with Tempest Gen wanting specifically islands. But yeah, I mean, hopefully going to have some fun with this one. This is slightly awkward on our mana. Opponent's on the play, but we have a 2-drop that we can actually cast and double Risen Reef. Tempest Gen's probably going to be able to get some work in as well. I'm going to keep this. I don't know if I should be aggressively looking for Embodiment of Spring or Mana Leaf in this deck to get up to our 4-drops, but seeing as how we have a couple of playables, let's give it a shot. And it looks like we're up against Nexus right off the bat. And we have Risen Reeftron, so we probably won't see payoffs for that. Alright, well, if this is Nexus, I probably just need to run out my Trickster here just to get a clock down. The Risen Reefs aren't actually going to be that good for our clock. If it's not, if it's the Oko deck, then I probably want to leave Trickster to actually make something lose all abilities. Okay, I'm just going to start applying pressure. I think that that's the best line I can take for multiple different decks. If it is Oko, we're probably going to go over the top of them. If it's Nexus, then I'm probably just going to sit here and feel bad because that deck generates bad gameplay. 3 differently named lands, all in blue-green, really looking like Nexus. Well, if I hit an untapped land next turn, that means I get to Risen Reef. Alright, yep, you censored me. Alright, well that's sad. I really wanted the untapped land there. This Fabled Passage is likely just going to get me a forest. Right now, Tempest Djinn is only going to be a 1/4, which is quite awful by most standards. But getting multiple Risen Reefs and then triggering a Master of Waves with multiple of them seems like it'd at least be pretty fun. Opponent did not immediately slam a Wilderness Reclamation, so that's a little hopeful. Expecting another Censor just because... Yep, Illumination, so Nexus confirmed. Well, we just... Do we reveal that to our opponent? Nope. Okay, so they didn't see the Master of Waves. Ooh-hoo-hoo. Oh, I don't know what to do. Risen Reef or just run out... I think we have to Risen Reef. I think that's just our allotment in life, is we need to go for multiple triggers. Alright, Tempest Djinn goes to hand. Shore Crasher goes to hand. That means we're going to be discarding to hand size. Not the best, but... Opponent is still 2 lands away from Nexus. If I slam a Master of Waves next turn, it means I'm only attacking for 4. Yeah, we pretty much lost this. Would have loved to have seen a land on turn 4. I think that would have made a huge difference there. Alright, well, I think I'd prefer to keep the Elemental around, especially because Tempest Djinn is only currently a 2/4. I did mention that the islands are probably going to get a little awkward with this list, but... Alright, well, I'm not going to make them play through too much of it. I guess we'll see if they have Nexus of Fate. As long as they don't have a way to continuously dig, as long as they're just relying on the back of Castle Vantress to try to scry into it, we'll give them a couple of more turns, but... Yeah, this is... not quite so fun Magic, watching an opponent just play with themselves. Well, they're going to have a lot of mana, which means they get scry multiple times. But we're at least 2 turns away from attacking for any kind of decent damage. Okay, there's another Nexus. I'm not going to watch them touch themselves. It's not worth my time. Alright, Aether Gust can put a green permanent back on top of their deck, which seems pretty good. Mystical Dispute can counter. Scavenging Ooze, they don't really care about their graveyard at all. Tidebinder Mage is in here basically for the green devotion lists, or potentially mono red. Tireless Tracker's here to grind. We're not really going to try to grind. We're looking for faster clocks. The Embodiment of Spring is probably one of the worst cards here. Yes, it ramps us, but we need to start applying pressure fairly quickly. Actually, holding up Aether Gust or Mystical Dispute and being able to crack this is probably fine. I should probably look for something that's a little bit on the slower side. I'm going to cut 2 Risen Reefs. The attrition game plan is likely not going to be very effective here. Shore Crasher Elemental is just a 3/3. Tempest Djinn isn't actually an Elemental. Maybe it's just all the Risen Reefs. We saw how awkward they are when they're only attacking for 1 apiece. And we're bringing in a couple of non-creatures. We still have 29, which you need about 26 to be effective. So, yeah, maybe keep the Coco then. We'll take out a Trickster. Tapping one of their creatures really doesn't do anything here. That's just the generic 2/2 for us. I could probably see a world in which we're supposed to take out the merfolks and leave some of the other things. Alright, well this has a little bit of a curve to it. Significantly better than the Skeptical hand I kept last turn. Being on the play is also going to be a pretty big get here. Alright, so likely leading towards an opt. Trickster has flash, so may as well sit back. I don't have green. Let's send a message. Get in there, Mr. Embodiment of Spring. You're not quite Velo Summer, but you can sure turn sideways just fine. This is kind of opening me to Censor, but that would have also cleared the way for Tempest Gen, so I was perfectly fine with that exchange. And I might even be running this back for that exact same reason. The Tempest Gen is only going to be a 2-4 at the moment. Now, I think I have to run this out in hopes of it resolving. If they censor it, they censor it, but this is going to represent the largest clock going down. All right, Mystical Dispute. Yep, that's a thing. That also means I can double spell next turn regardless of what I draw, which seems like it's going to be pretty core towards us winning. Ooh, that's a Collected Company. Well, opponent has Mystical Dispute up for the Collected Company. So let's just give this a shot, see if they go for anything like Opted End Step. Hieroglyphic Illumination. So they could still potentially have Censor up. I'm perfectly okay to let them just cycle that off. And oh, they don't have green. That Blast Zone's a little awkward in their list. Okay, so I can crack Fabled Passage, go get green. That's going to turn on Embodiment of Spring. It's also going to let me Coco, but Coco's likely going to get countered. If I go get blue, I could double Merfolk Trickster. It'll put 6 power on the table and put opponent under a 3-turn clock. I won't have the mana for Collected Company, though. I think I'd prefer to live in a world where I expect one of the Merfolk Tricksters to get countered. And then untap and hopefully be able to Coco in next turn or two. Hitting a Master of Waves off the top is also going to be a really good draw. And also bait out a counter. And honestly, go ahead and Blast Zone it up. Yep. Shore Crasher Elemental. Not hitting green mana is... whatever. Get in there, Embodiment. I trust you to do you. Now, Shore Crasher Elemental, I can morph it, but it's going to cost 5 to turn up, and that doesn't really benefit me at all. I'd rather put this out there in case I rip a Master of Waves off the top. It's just 3 pips versus 0. Interesting. Opponent paused like they had something there. Yep. If they spend their turn cracking the Blast Zone, they won't have enough mana up to counter a Coco if I rip a green source. Wow, they're having all kinds of mana problems over there. And kind of getting punished for not getting the green. Alright, what have you got? Looks like it's just the Blast Zone. Bye to you guys. Let's go ahead and grow you twice. +1, -1. +1, -1. And they're still dead next turn anyway, just to the Shore Crasher Elemental. Ugh, yikes. No green mana is kind of punishing. No green mana for them either, though, means that we're probably in an okay spot. Breeding Pool. I'm going to shock this into play. My life total doesn't matter in this matchup, and being able to Coco for... I don't think I have anything I could hit relevant off of it, but I can at least represent it pre-combat. Petty Theft. Alright, let's take a quick look at the deck list again. Yep, that doesn't really give me anything to do there. But I do want to cast my Coco while they're tapped down. That is something I know for sure. They have to have negate in where creature matchup. Oh my gosh, that is awful. That is so bad. And we're putting a Master of Waves to the bottom. Odds are that we're going to be cracking an Embodiment of Spring before it's relevant, but put Master on top. It's just a little bit cleaner in case we do actually start filtering through our deck. 3 more Cocos will end up getting us 18 cards down. Alright, and opponent scoops it up. That doesn't feel good. Like, none of that feels good. Do I want the Risen Reefs over probably at least Harbinger? I don't want to bounce their creatures back to their hand for them. Seeing the Brazen Borrowers means that Trickster is at least a little bit better. I can see this being more correct. Trickster can tap down the Brazen Borrower, which likely isn't relevant for too much combat since they can only block things with flying, but we do have a 2/2 that flies. Oh, we also have the Tempest Gen, so yeah, the Tricksters can at least make it so that their Brazen Borrowers can't block. Scavenging Ooze won't really grow at all. Tireless Tracker's a little bit too slow. Risen Reef's a little bit too slow. Yeah, that seems fine. We stumbled kind of hard last game and still did alright. This is a turn 3 Collected Company. Alright, this is actually one of the better hands we've had so far. And I'm actually going to Fabled Passage on one. Again, my life total isn't super relevant, and I know that this is going to be coming in tapped for the first 3 turns. If I'm planning on Cocoing on 3, it's going to be just a tap land regardless, where the Breeding Pool actually represents a at least kind of healthy life total. And opponent knows we are a mostly blue deck at this point, so just grab the island, get some F6 value in. Ooh, that's mildly interesting. Now let's see if they have a Mystical Dispute for Marleaf Pixie. Okay, it does not apparently seem high enough priority. There's a Blast Zone that does clear up a lot of our 2-drops, but the way that we sideboarded it is they have to at least get it up to 3. Then that growth spiral means that we're going to be able to Collected Company unless they board it into exactly negate. Although this looks like a Brazen Borrower. Okay, I have nothing really incentivizing me to do something else here, so let's go ahead and Coco, see if opponent has anything. Just try to get as much power on the table so that we can get our clock up. They brought in negate for the 4 Collected Companies. Oh, I really wish our deck was better tuned to just punish this. We wanted to do cute things. And unfortunately, I'm sure everybody knows I'd do it again. I'm going to run back with garbage next week. Okay, so they left the 5 mana up. This is likely just a Castle Vantress Scribe, but I can't really put it past them with 3 cards to have some amount of counter magic. I believe my best line here is the Risen Reef into the Marleaf Pixie. Alternatively, Tempest Gen is going to currently be a 3/4. Yeah, I think I want to try to ramp as much as possible. And because I'm going to get countered by Mystic Dispute anyway, let's go ahead and Risen Reef first. If they have Censor, then they might just try to make it so that we can't attack. Ooh, that's actually awesome. Okay, again, my life total doesn't really matter. Let's just get that in. The Mystical Dispute means that I'm 100% attacking here. Just get a little bit more damage in and be able to hold up a counterspell for their first... They would have ran out Wilderness Reclamation by now, so for their first Nexus of Fate. Right now, Master of Waves will get me 3 triggers off of Risen Reef. Allow me to attack for 4 next turn. And then my opponent will be on a 2-turn clock after that. All right. Oko is out. Funny enough, Elkinus is probably beneficial for us at the moment. Trickster. I don't think I could attack this Oko. Them gaining life is bad, but he just has way too much loyalty. So currently with 5 mana, I can... I'm trying to figure out a way in which Master of Waves trigger, reveal a land, but don't put it into play. I can make a land drop for turn. I'll have 2 mana available for a Merfolk Trickster at instep to tap them down. I'll end up having Master of Waves with 3 elementals, 5 of these guys, so I'll be attacking for 8 next turn. Is that actually good enough? I have to hit a land in my top 3 for that to work, too. I won't be able to kill Oko here, but I'll be able to chip him down to at least 2. I'm also a little concerned that they're going to try to exchange the food for the Pixie because they are a little low on mana. I want to hold up the Mystical Dispute, which means Master of Waves doesn't need to hit. So I don't have another elemental in hand to trigger the Risen Reef at the moment. Tempest Djinn can get traded by Oko. I think I just want to hit Oko for 4 here, and if I whiff on a land, then... I mean, it really doesn't matter. I'm probably just going to hold Mystical Dispute up. Alright. There's an embodiment, another embodiment, and a Hinterland Harbor. So I'm going to say no to this. Put it into play. Then I have 2 mana available. So let's actually just embodiment again, because this is essentially a free draw. Shore Crasher Elemental. Actually, it's not a free draw, because now if I leave Pixie back, they're going to know I'm holding mana up. And then, yep, I actually just have to let this go then. Because what would happen is, before they cast anything, they'll just elk this so it doesn't tap for mana. Our opponent elking Master of Waves will kill all the tokens. Yikes. Elking Master of Waves means Oko just dies, though. Kind of okay. I'm not a fan of that play. They could have bounced the Master of Waves and got rid of all the tokens. We did get value off the Risen Reef trigger, but I mean, even elking the Master of Waves destroys it. Yeah, I'm not overly psyched with how they did that. They also only have 1 card in hand now. That's actually pretty sweet. Alright, I think that means we let the shenanigans begin. So first things first, let's go ahead and Merfolk Trickster. Just tap down the food token. I'd really rather just kill Oko and be done with this. The Brazen Borrower can get flashed in to block the Pixie, so the Pixie actually gets to stay back now and look defensive. Brazen Borrower only being able to block flyers is actually quite good for us. Yeah, that just tells me that... Yeah, I'm not a fan of that line either. They should have at least waited for me to declare attackers first, because you can only block creatures with flying. Okay, so Embodiment hits Oko, Master of Waves hits Oko, that hits opponent, that hits opponent, that hits opponent. Then they're going to have to start ramping up Blast Zone to answer my 2 drops. I cannot Tempest Djinn and hold up the Mystical Dispute. I can hold up Trickster for instep with Mystical Dispute and the big activation. Yeah, let's do this. Embodiment, just for the trigger off the Risen Reef. Get a little bit more free value here. Yeah, now you just told me you don't have anything to do here, so I have 3 mana to do anything that I want to here. Master of Waves, we might be able to get to do it! Now, do I actually want to run out the Pixie? I am super pinched on mana here. I think I want to run out the Pixie. And then I get to hold up this one for Mystical Dispute, which can hit Nexus. It cannot hit Wilderness Reclamation. Even if I hit Wilderness Reclamation, we wouldn't be able to counter it because it'd still have 3 mana up. And yeah, close that out. Well, I do think opponent's deck really lends itself to really unfun Magic. It just really didn't matter what they did that game. They got to divert a little bit of damage over towards Oko, but yeah, it was either they went off or they didn't. And regardless of how much value we triggered off of the Risen Reef, it just really wasn't going to matter. I would have loved to have slammed that last Master of Waves, though, and gotten like 20 triggers off the top of our deck. If they would have let us cast another Master of Waves, we actually might have gotten close to decking that game. Okay, opponent, apparently you don't want to have fun against blue elementals. Or you do, you just wanted to wait until the last second. Tidebinder Mage, I actually think is going to be kind of sneakily good in this format. Ooh, this is awesome. So this is actually going to be Embodiment. We can Fog Combat, go ramp up, and then turn 3 Coco. Being on the draw is slightly bad, but we can Harbinger at the bare minimum and just hold back Embodiment and Harbinger of the Tides and try to play a little bit of a slower game. Oh, thought we were getting Thoughtseized. And 4th land is acceptable. This Hinterland Harbor, I don't know. If I had to kick this off again, I might spend a little bit more time on the mana. The Tempest Djinn not getting buffed by that is a actual cost to this deck. Okay, and not sending a message with Embodiment because I can always just ramp and Coco next turn. If they end up playing something, I guess I actually can't Harbinger it. Yay, more Okos! They are Sultai food, so I actually do need to cast the Collected Company during my turn, despite the fact that it opens me up to get Elked. What are the odds? They shouldn't have Mystic Dispute main board. They shouldn't have Negate main board or Disdainful Stroke. I actually might take the opportunity that I am on Moto to look up a current list for Sultai food. Sorry, opponent, you're going to have to wait for one moment. They are Sultai. Sultai food. Okay. Never seen that card before. No main board counter spells, so let's go ahead and just ship it back. This actually does let me hold up Harbinger of Tides if they try to attack in with the food token, or I could just try to Coco into one. That actually seems like a really solid plan. Okay, let's do this. Getting more islands for my Tempest Djinns. This also makes it so that Tempest Djinn I hit off of Coco is going to be able to kill the food token. Tempest Djinn. Ooh, Shorecrasher Elemental and Risen Reef is super tempting here. But I think I want to go for Tempest Djinn so that I can actually block the creature, and then Risen Reef is still just a free trigger. Blocking and killing the food token here is going to turn on Revolt for Fatal Push. Oh, we got another Coco. Sometimes it's awesome casting these spells. Okay, Murderous Rider. Perfectly acceptable. Probably going to Tempest Djinn Harbinger this turn. Just get rid of the food token. Chip in for some damage. I also could see the Tempest Djinn just getting Elked, which is going to be an active use of Oko and put him down to kind of a dangerous zone. So, does ordering matter? Not exactly. They still shouldn't have a counter spell. If I Coco, I can't multi-spell this turn. Yeah, let's just go for the multi-spell, get some value here. Harbinger of the Tides returns a tapped creature to its owner's hand. Obviously, food token just goes away. Then Tempest Gen gets to be a threat that they have to deal with. Chip in at Oko. I actually think we should stomp this ground if we make it to late game and all of our stuff doesn't get answered. We get wrecked kind of hard by Ritual of Soot, but if we get enough Risen Reef triggers, we should be able to rebuild fairly easily. That is potentially a problem. So now if they elk my Tempest Gen, then they won't trade it with the Tireless Tracker, but I'm not going to be hitting for nearly as hard as I want to be. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Their 2 cards in hand means that they're going to be able to play the control game for a while. Alright, well my island count doesn't matter anymore, so... Actually, first things first, I want to Coco and see if I hit anything I have to invest into, like a Shore Crasher Elemental. Yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Merfolk Trickster is good. Pixie's fine. So I can Trickster tap this down, hit Oko for 6. Is that good enough? Probably not. If I Pixie, I'm not really set up to do anything else next turn. Yeah, let's just go ahead and Trickster. Tappy tap the tracker. If they don't actually crack the clue in response here, it won't grow by the time that I tap it down because this will lose all abilities. Yep, so that at least ensures that they don't have any instant speed shenanigans. Then, yeah, let's just slam Oko. I want Oko off the table. Murderous Rider coming down is going to keep most of my creatures back. Like, only the Elks will be able to attack. I just want to rip a... Oh, I don't think we beat that. That shoots down both Risen Reefs. That means that Master of Waves is just a terrible top deck. Yikes. Yeah, I really just don't have an answer for that. GG, well played. Like, Risen Reef's 1 toughness is real cost. Alright, creates food token, means that if any of the 2/2s get through, we won't kill Oko. Fabled Passage doesn't really get us there. Yep, can't do anything about it. Tempest Gen not having flying means it's the only thing that can attack in, and they're just going to block with Walking Ballista and probably shoot us in the face. But Tireless Tracker is why we have that in the sideboard. Aether Gust is also going to be pretty solid here. It can bounce Oko, their Tireless Tracker. Just a couple of things we can do there. Mystical Dispute. Let's actually take a look at this as long as I've got it pulled up. Where'd you go? This is the Cauldron's Familiar list. I don't actually think that they're running that. I could hit Vraska, Murderous Rider. I'd have to actually kill the Murderous Rider. Won't be able to kill the Caryatid. Oh, yeah, they look a lot more like the Sultai control list. There you are. Courser could be a problem. I guess they could have had Drown in the log last game. Not overly psyched about that. Sorry, Windows, killing me. I do think Tidebinder Mage comes in over the Harbinger, though. Scavenging Ooze could be a little interesting. I don't think it's high enough value to prioritize bringing it in, though. Shore Crasher Elemental just gets elked. Not super on board with that. This is basically making the trade for Tireless Trackers and potentially 1 Aether Gust. And then the Harbingers come out for the Tidebinders. The Embodiment of Spring's also slightly awkward here. I think that this is the best we're going to do. If our Risen Reef stick around, we have a pretty good shot here. If they can just Walking Ballista them down, we're probably out of luck. And this hand doesn't seem good enough. If I had a lot of non-fabled passages in hand, this tireless tracker would probably be a little more appealing, but the fact that I have to crack 2 of my landfall lands just is not good enough. And this looks fine. I'll be able to make a couple of 2-drops, tireless tracker on 4, and master if it comes to it. Although it's likely that we're going to... Tidebinder on 2 isn't going to happen. Merfolk Trickster at their 2 might happen. No, it doesn't seem very likely. We're probably going to be Tidebindering on 3 to either get a Courser or a Tireless Tracker. If opponent doesn't Oko. If they do Oko, then I'll wish this had Flash, but you can only cover so many bases. And mulliganed into the Thoughtseize. Alright, opponent, you get your pick. I assume it's Tireless Tracker here. Tidebinder Mage is also really annoying depending on what's in their hand, but Tireless Tracker is going to keep us in the fight against them longer. Yep, makes sense. Castle Vantress. Well, I really don't want to show them that I drew it. I'm not going to run out Tidebinder Mage for no value, so we'll just put another tap land in play. Then it's going to be up to opponent to answer Tidebinder Mage. Or they just run out their blue creature. That seems fair too. I do think Tidebinder here is probably correct because that sets me up to Master of Waves next turn and then start using Castle Vantress to scry if my top decks are bad. I assume opponent has answers here anyway, but I'd rather actually commit to the board because that can happen, and if they loot with Jace enough, they're going to be flashing it back anyway. Do think it's a little sloppy waiting unless they had the additional black land. If they're trying to figure out how to get into a fatal push or something, that might have made a little bit more sense. And that is why we ran out the Tidebinder. Kind of just assumed we'd be hitting lands because that's pretty much how Magic works. They Thoughtseize away your action and then you draw lands. There's a Tireless Tracker, they're going to get a Clue, and I think we are not coming back from this one. I'm also really hearing Fatal Push here and then flip Jace. Or just Thoughtseize is fine. I think I have to hit Coco into double Tireless Tracker. Make my land drop is probably my best line from here. Oh, that Tidebinder technically is going to at least tap down the Tireless Tracker, but they're just going to continuously get clues. Come on now. Yep. Tidebinder's a 0-2 thanks to Jace, so there's no point in attacking. Yeah, I'm done here. Good Thoughtseize from opponent. I don't know, maybe that was just one turn too soon. I could have collected company at their end step, would have hit a... Probably actually would have gone Tireless Tracker and Thassa, and then Tireless Tracker gets unblockable, attacks in after growing to a 4-3. But opponent also had 3 cards in hand. They could start flashing stuff back with Jace. It wasn't likely that we were going to get very far there, but having exactly collected company on top was about the only way we could have gotten out of that. All right, well, I mean, we're doing blue things. I do think opponent got a little lucky in game 1 of that match, but what can you do? We also got a little unlucky in game 2, but our deck is very, very clogged at the 3-drops. It's kind of the cost of doing business with Collected Company. Collected Company is a good card, but when you spend your turn 1 dropping either a tap land or an Embodiment of Spring, you do kind of get punished by decks running just very powerful cards like Oko. I really, really wish that our first opponent would have let us drop the Master of Waves onto that giant board, though. Pixie into Shore Crasher into Master. Being on the draw is super painful here, but this is fine. We have our land drops to make most of our drops, and we should be able to play anything we rip off the top, so Mono red. This looks like Saffron Olive's 8-whack list. Fabled Passage here being a tap land is actually quite good because it partially thins our deck, but is also just a tap land when we didn't have another play. Alright then. Double Map Ruins is actually a really painful start. If this is what their hand looks like, they actually might take enough damage that we can just beat them out with general beats. Shore Crasher Elemental being able to grow and shrink is also really good for us. But if we get 8-whacked out, we get 8-whacked out. Okay. Pixie it is. Pixie kind of profitably blocks here. If they end up using a burn spell to kill it, then Shore Crasher Elemental should be able to clean up a little bit. And Master of Waves is actually pro-red. Don't know why they decided to make him pro-red, but he is pro-red. This looks like a Stoke the Flames, and they overpaid for it. Pile Driver. Well, that is the match for our Master of Waves here. Coco. So I think new plan is actually just Coco, and then Master of Waves when we untap. This is going to be massive, though. Like, I really can't overstate how big this is going to be. It's going to be attacking as a 7-2, so our clock shrinks significantly. Ooh. I could morph this for 3. It'd be a 2-2, but then it dies to removal. I actually think that's our next turn. I still think Coco's our best line here, but being able to put down a generic 2-2 after opponent tries to combat shenanigans with a Wild Slash feels pretty fine. Okay. Obelisk on Gabos. That's fine. That actually just bought us enough time that we might be pretty solid here. Because Coco should get us some pips, and then Master of Waves is going to be pretty good. Alright, well, Tempest Gen is a real clock. Harbinger's going to come down and be able to bounce something. Let's put Master of Waves on top and then any order. Let's go ahead and bounce the token because it permanently goes away. Yeah, those were some solid hits. Harbinger, bounce Skirk Prospector, takes some damage off of us. We currently can drop Shore Crasher Elemental and Harbinger, or we just Master of Waves and then we're going to have lethal on the crackback. Yeah, I think we just go for the fastest win here. So, big Master of Waves. 7 elementals. Where is our Risen Reef at this moment? Now if they attack in with all of their creatures, they just guaranteed die. They might actually just be guaranteed dead. Tapping anything off Random Map Ruins is going to take 2 life, and then that's going to allow us to kill them in 2 turns with Tempest Gen only. Master's just going to bounce off of anything but the Pile Driver. Yeah, feels pretty good, man. Master of Waves, such a silly card. I was actually super surprised to find out that there is no Island Walk Merfolk Lord in Pioneer. Like, there's so much Merfolk support, but nothing that gives Island Walk. No Master of the Pearl Trident, Lord of Atlantis, nothing like that. If I'm trying to figure out anything opponent could hit us with, it could be like Burning Tree, Burning Tree, Burning Tree into a Goblin Bushwhacker, but it looks like that's not what's happening here. So 2 more. That is actually a lot of damage. It's not really lethal, though. Guess they were just hoping I wouldn't block. Oh, they didn't do the math. They just figured this is what we've got. I mean, that's kind of a cute play. All right, well, the red suite comes in, the life gain suite likely coming in, although it hurts our blue devotion. We're already bringing a lot of stuff in, so let's take a look at this. Embodiment of Spring is a really good blocker. Scavenge News actually probably just needs to come in so that it can block the pile driver. I actually might even try to find an argument for some number of tireless trackers for that. We actually might be doing a lot of boarding here. Thos is a little slow. We don't really need her, although it's cute to hit her off of Coco. Shore Crasher Elemental is also able to block Pile Driver. Tempest Djinn being an X4 is actually relevant. Risen Reef is probably the cut again. I really like the value he generates, but when we're just trying to do a foot race, it seems like that's one of the better options. Harbinger, bouncing things is kind of cute. I don't think we're going to enable Flash very often. Merfolk Trickster should be able to shut down a lot of the mass attack shenanigans and also be a really good combat trick. Master of Waves is just great. Our curve just like significantly dropped by taking these out. Maybe just take out some number of Harbingers. I think I just like the Flash on Trickster a little bit more. Bouncing the token off the Instigator doesn't seem very relevant. They could be on not Krinko's command. There's a 3 mana one that generates 4 tokens, I believe, that came out of Dragons of Tarkir. That was a card that saw a lot of play because it worked really well with Stoke the Flames. Pixie Ramping also seems a little loose. The 2/2 isn't overly relevant compared to everything else that we've got. So then how do we feel about Pixie versus Tracker? Pixie ramps us into Master of Waves faster. Yeah, this seems fine. In a list of creatures that can block the pile driver, we have Scavenging Ooze, Shore Crasher Elemental, but we have to morph that. Tidebinder can't actually block it. Let's do this. This feels fine. And then if we take a look at the curve, it actually does that curve up like real deck should. Scavenging Ooze gaining life also feels super relevant here. No green. But we have a Tidebinder on 2. We have a Trickster. Opponent kept their 7. This seems fine just because Tireless Tracker can block if we find a green source. And we should have 13 green sources. Another Tidebinder's good. It's also very possible we just get nut drawed here and really can't come back from it. Fabled Passage would be super good if I could find an untapped green source just so Tireless Tracker will get 2 clues. Let's tap down the real one. Won't be able to untap. And then the 2/2 is a really relevant blocker. Opponent's not on Painful Mana, so Racing's not going to be nearly as relevant. Alright. My plan here is to hold up Trickster. Trickster should be able to put some shenanigans on something like a Bushwhacker and at least block a token. I can go get my green source for Tireless Tracker. Ripping anything off the top will let me Coco. That's a Ringleader. That's a good card. That's a Chain Whirler and a War Chief. I really didn't want to give away the fact that I had the Trickster. So I'm going to take the 2 damage here. That might be a little greedy, but opponent had a slower start. So this is going to let me eat the token, and then I can always Tidebinder if I don't want to try to get into Coco. So let me get my only green source. There's blue. So Pixie Tidebinder actually looks really appealing. Otherwise it's Tireless Tracker and a land, but I don't really get a clue. This Goblin War Chief is going to make it so that they have haste. So if they have a pile driver, he's coming down. That might be enough reason for me to slam the Tireless Tracker here. He's also going to replace himself. It's a little slow versus mono red, but he does technically replace himself. Then this Tidebinder's not going to be blocking anything, so we'll send him in. The Merfolk Trickster can stay back for the Ringleader this time around. Alright, Mr. Tidebinder, go on in there. Hitting turn 4 and being ahead on life versus the mono red deck is really good feeling. Wild Slash into Pile Driver is pretty dangerous territory. There's the War Chief, so things get haste. Bushwhacker makes the things bigger. Okay, well, I'm going to trade here just because he's a bigger threat. I want to keep my Bushwhacker around at least for the moment. So I can tap it and make it never come back. I think my plan is still Cocoing here, although Marrowleaf Pixie is going to at least let me double spell next turn if I whiff on a land. Yeah, let's do that. Then I can keep the Reckless Bushwhacker tap down. And I'm happily going to trade this for their Lord. It doesn't actually Lord things, but they're trying to keep it around for hasty reasons. Yep, there's the Chain Whirler we knew about. That pings everything we have for 1. And the first strike on that's actually pretty painful, but we kept the Tidebinder in hand exactly for this reason. Master of Waves. That's actually a super good one. Well, I'm really glad I ran out the Pixie here, because this means I'm going to Tidebinder, lock down the Chain Whirler. Tidebinder Tron versus the mono red deck. They're probably hating life at the moment. And then I think I want to Coco here. The Master of Waves will be able to give me 3, 5, 6, 7 elemental tokens. Yeah, that might not be relevant. And I am going to offer the Tireless Tracker. If they want to block it, I'll just grow it. Master of Waves actually wins here. I'll do the correct played Master of Waves. We can still technically die to a Bushwhacked Pile Driver. But yeah, opponent locks it up. That was hitting a lot of the right cards and actually having good sideboard cards for the matchup. We didn't even see the Aether Gust or anything like that, but Tidebinder is a really good merfolk. It was one of the more powerful ones that I really liked boarding into just because it did so many things. It was a threat, it locked down something, and it increased your pip count. Like, it just did such good things. Overall, though, this is performing fairly well. I do think we got a little unlucky versus the food deck, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have something like an Imprison in the Moon. I know that's not a great card. I'm just trying to use it as an example. Maybe a Pithy Needle to try to shut down Planeswalkers. That Oko was very, very rough versus the Sultai control list. But Oko's also on a very, very powerful level. Like, he just does things that other cards can't really manage to pull off. Yikes. I can't cast anything in this hand, but it is so close. I have my 1 of Forest. We have 10, 18, 19, 23 lands, so I have 3 turns to rip a blue source of 21 out of 50. Yeah, we're keeping this. We're doing all the greedy things. Then, in case we actually rip Basic Island, I'm going to be leading on the Hinterland Harbor here. It will come into play untapped on turn 2, but if I find Basic Island, it means I can Trickster or Harbinger. And opponent's on Mutavault. That doesn't exactly mean what I expect it to mean. I'm going to run out Hinterland Harbor again, expect the same logic. If I find a Basic Island and I want a Tempest Djinn or Shore Crasher, I can. And it looks like we're playing against Mono Red again. Well, we have a lot of pips, and we found a Master of Waves. I do want to hit my next land drop here, so I'm actually just going to lead on Risen Reef. It's also going to spark any removal, if they've got it. Seems unlikely that they just attack in with Mutavault. Yep. That's kind of rough. Fabled Passage is good, though, so I can actually bounce their token here. Do I want to do that though? So Harbinger bounce the token, and then Trickster if they try to attack. I can actually Trickster during their main phase, and then that's just going to keep it back, and they won't get another token for a turn, and that lets me use my turn to build up pips. Although I don't have enough blue sources because this basic forest. There's a reason we're only running one of them, and it's shown to be pretty awkward here. Risen Reef for 2 triggers also seems a little appealing, but that lets the Rabble Master go off for another full turn. Shore Crasher Elemental is going to be too hard for them to remove. Add 3 pips and just eat the token, as well as trigger the Risen Reef. Yeah, I think I just signed up for that. More triggers so I can start multicasting. And it's also going to be just a fantastic blocker. I didn't put that in my hand because it really didn't matter. It would have come down. I would have had an additional untap source, but it wouldn't have made a difference. I couldn't cast anything in hand. They had the lightning strike, but we're gonna fat butt him. Then that should at least make it so that the Rabble Master can't swing in. -1, +1. And a Wild Slash. Alright, well, that's perfectly acceptable by all of my standards. Yep, I'm taking my beats. Master of Waves is also going to be able to just infinitely block the Rabble Master, so not super concerned with that. Yikes. Okay, well, I think I'm going for value here, so let's Risen Reef. Embodiment of Spring is just a free blocker, and it's going to trigger twice. Yeah, between 3 more triggers, I should be able to find a basic land here. So we'll go ahead and run that out. And I just want that to go to hand, so no. Go ahead and run out the Fabled Passage. We can Embodiment of Spring. That gets to go into play. That gets to go into play. Even if I choose yes, it doesn't come in untapped. Then we get an island here, and I'm just going to Harbinger, because Harbinger is going to bounce the Rabble Master, so it's not going to be attacking this turn, and it's 1 free blocker. And Risen Reef's not blocking, so we'll get a free poke in. Poke away, Mr. Risen Reef. If my stuff doesn't die, currently Master of Waves is going to give me 6 tokens and 12 triggers. Oh, that's a problem. If they exert it, it means I'd likely have to Tempest Gen here. But I actually have enough to Master of Waves and Tempest Gen, so we're probably in a fine spot. Okay, well, this is looking more like mono-red mid-range than just red deck wins. Fabled Passage is fine. Alright. We're gonna do it! I'm so excited! We're gonna see so many cards I am actually gonna try to thin here. Although, now that I think about it, it's probably better to try to get more lands off the Risen Reef triggers. Alright. Come on, big money! Oh, I'm so happy. All right, another Tempest Gen means we're pretty safe, and the other Coco is actually really solid too. I can crack the embodiment to go ramp a little bit more should I need it. I'm currently holding up the Merfolk Trickster. All right. I am leaving back the embodiment because it kills a token. I suspect that my opponent's going to try to run out a Rabble Master this turn. So if they do, I can fog it down in their main step, and then, okay, they're just done. That was pretty sweet. And now we get to go back to the sweet sideboarding plan of just all the stuff versus aggro. I believe this is what we did. Was we took those guys, we trimmed a little bit of the Risen Reef. take a look here. Sort by converted mana cost. This looks good. I just have to cut one more thing. It's probably going to be a... I actually really like Trickster on the Glorybringer. It's a little cheeky, but I like it. Shore Crasher Elemental is just slightly awkward. We're good with that. Oh man, that value. That was so much value. Embodiment's a great blocker. Then I can Fog, Risen Reef. They kill the Risen Reef. I'm not in such a good spot, but I at least have plans for the first couple of turns, so I'm perfectly okay with this hand. Legion Loyalist. Unfortunately doesn't do much against our Embodiment of Spring. He could have actually bluffed there, having a Wild Slash. Ooh, I actually don't know how this works. So, till end of turn, this is going to tap all creatures and they lose all abilities. I believe this takes precedence. So if they try to attack in with 3 creatures next turn, then Merfolk Trickster should be able to remove the keywords and kill something. A Matter Reshaper. Of all the things I was expecting, it wasn't a Matter Reshaper. Alright, well, Risen Reef replaces itself. Let's get some more value. Shore Crasher, not exactly what I was looking for, but it's fine. I think I have to be afraid of Bushwhacker out of our opponent. I mean, first strike trample, Matter Reshaper is kind of a problem. Next turn could be Glorybringer. And if this eats a Wild Slash, I'm perfectly okay with that. Embercleave. I suppose that makes sense. Embercleave is going to make it a 2/2 double striker. Oh, they're going after the Matter Reshaper. All right, we'll take 8. And there's a Coco. Hitting Harbinger off of Coco is probably a decent enough reason to keep it in. The Shore Crasher Elemental can technically... No, it can't technically block the Matter Reshaper here. I think this is putting me on Coco. Actually, no, it's not. It's putting me on Scavenging Ooze this turn. And then when it goes to combat, I will Trickster down the Matter Reshaper so it can't attack this turn. Then I can Collected Company next turn. Yep, that happens. If they tap out, then... Yikes. I was going to say, if they tap out, then I can double block with the Risen Reef. But that doesn't work anymore. Alright, tap down your Matter Reshaper. Bone Crusher Giant's a really good Magic card. Aether Gust can technically deal with the Embercleave. I won't have enough mana to Shore Crasher Elemental, activate the Grow the Fat Butt to survive, and then Embercleave, but this only gives it +1/+1. That means Trickster should be able to kill it if I Aether Gust away the Embercleave. Does allow them to re-equip at instant speed, though, which is probably a big enough problem. I don't want to allow them to do that. So that's putting me on Coco this turn, so that's going to be a tap land. And opponent, you get your shot. And that's a Glorybringer. Need to hit something really good here. Tidebinder Mage will be able to tap down the Glorybringer. Tempest Gen can block the Matter Reshaper? No, it can't. Not yet. Well, it's pretty easily these two. Don't care about the order. Let's tap down the Glorybringer. Yikes. So if I throw all of these in front of it, I'll kill it, but they'll still have an Embercleave active. They'll probably kill my Tempest Gen. Alright, well, Embodiment of Spring, you get to soak up 3 damage. That's your lot in life today. So 6 mana doesn't actually accomplish anything. Was Breeding Pool tapped. We don't need to take the 2 life, and we're not going to be doing anything else. We can Shore Crash our Elemental. Then that's going to make attacking slightly awkward for them. Tidebinder's not blocking, so it can get in. I think I need to leave Merfolk Trickster back so I have something to block the Mutavault. Random Map Runes is putting us at a virtual 5. Okay, there's a Bone Crusher Giant. I think my stuff is big enough I don't care about the Bone Crusher Giant. Alright, let's try to hit the Embercleave. They put it on top, makes sense because they just get to flash it in on something else, but we're kind of far behind. Matter Reshaper is going to reveal it. They're going to put it into their hand. Another Tempest Gen. The double strike just makes it so awkward. Combat math here is Bone Crusher Giant just kills anything I throw in front of it. Legion Loyalist will hit us for 4, assuming I don't put blockers in. Yep. I have to put a clock on my opponent, so first Tempest Gen gets in. Then we run out second Tempest Gen. That does it. We weren't going to beat a Wild Slash there. Because then they just exert and kill our only blocker. They double cleave and we're out. So seeing the Embercleave, does that change anything? I'm slightly more inclined to bring in Mystical Dispute, although it's going to be really hard to hit that because they can ramp it out pretty quickly. Harbinger can return the creature and just be a massive tempo gain because then they'll have to pay to equip it. Harbinger's looking a little bit more appealing. I guess Pixie's coming out for that, and Aether Gust was slightly awkward. Most of their creatures have haste. That is a tempo play, but I don't think it's really worth it here. I'd rather hit things I can hit with Coco and still have tempo off the Harbinger of the Tides, and it can hit the Matter Reshaper, which just punished us for far too long. If we could have answered it faster, we would have actually had a decent shot of winning that. Also, if our mana was a little nicer with the Tempest Gen, but what can you do? Scoos on 2, Tempest Gen into Master of Waves. I'm on board. I like this hand. It's not amazing, but I like it. And since most of our deck is blue, Basic Island here is fine, unlike the Forest. Second Scoos is good in case they are on Wild Slash. Opponent is also running Lightning Strike, which is worth noting. They might have taken them out because of the Tempest Gen, but any green source here means that I can eat the previous Scoos. I'm running out the Scoos here. It's going to beat more removal, and if we untap, it's going to grow to at least a 3. It's also going to let me use my green mana next turn. Yep. Have to assume as much, but Legion Warboss. That's a good card. Tempest Gen here is going to survive the most removal. They won't be able to Glorybringer us yet, and then I can hold up Harbinger in case they do. If they try to Glorybringer, they'll still be able to exert. Harbinger only hits a tapped creature. Yikes. So what they are clearly stating here is if I block the Legion Warboss or the Loyalist, they have a Wild Slash and they'll kill my Tempest Gen with First Strike before I get a chance to respond. But I have to deal with this, so I have to try to call a bluff here. Embercleave is a good magic card. Alright. Well, this means I get a Harbinger, hopefully draw 2-drop here. Embodiment of Spring technically blocks. Overall, though, I think we lost this one. We'll bounce the Loyalist, get the counter off of it. Make Embercleave expensive to equip, although not overly expensive. There's a Thought Knot, which means Embercleave is going to be able to get around the fact I have Pro Red. Yep, not beating this. First Strike just means that I'm not going to be able to do anything here. Eat a token, just keep my pip count high, block a little bit of damage. Risen Reef is cute, but not what I'm looking for here. I'm going to have to throw so much in front of that Thought Knots here. Yikes, that is a very deadly combo. Embercleave with Thought Knots here. Alright, and opponent really did have just the perfect hand. I don't think that gets much better for them, except for maybe a Rabblemaster. Rabblemaster definitely would have been pretty good. Nope. Don't want to activate you. I want to go to blocks. I am fairly positive that we're dead, but I have to get rid of First Strike here. I'm going to block the 1/1 that I can kill. And I can't block with tokens, so yep, we're just super dead. Doesn't really matter. Legion Loyalist, super, super good versus us there. I actually think that we do quite well versus Red, but that was just insanely brutal for some, I don't want to say inopportune draws. We just didn't see what we needed to. An opponent literally had all of the correct removal. Like, we had Scoos to gain life and to grow to be able to block and get around some of their sideboard cards, but just Wild Slash, Stomp, then perfect attacks with Legion Loyalist, Thought Not to take relevant cards out of our hand, Embercleave for a 5/5 double striker. Really relentless assault. An actual board clear would be great there. I don't think putting anything like Aetherize is correct in this list, but if this were a white deck, I'd definitely have a couple of Settles on the side, so could maybe try visiting that. Tidebinder Mage just would have died to the number of Wild Slashes our opponents had. It might have bought us one more turn. I guess we could have tapped down the Loyalist had it survived, and then they would have been able to get First Strike and unblockable by tokens. And that would have actually been relevant. Again, though, like, opponent had a Giant in exile. They had multiple cards that were good against us there. This has a curve. It casts things. It's turn 3 Coco. while holding up Trickster. And it's red again. I'm guessing all of the mono red, or all of the mono black players switched over to mono red when Copter got banned. At least that's my first assumption after seeing everything today. The Embodiment of Spring here is either going to force them to send 2 spells upstairs or to send a spell at the Embodiment of Spring, which is just solid across the board. I mean, at the bare minimum, they're supposed to bluff and make me call, but we'll see if they actually want to spend any mana to try to get this down. Doesn't look like it. Redwaste Steamkin. So this is actually a really big problem long term. Merfolk Trickster hitting this at upkeep is probably what I'm supposed to do. Although I can totally see fogging combat and just ramping up for Coco next turn being relevant. Yeah, I'm not really sure. This is going to be a bigger version of the deck that we just played against, because Runway Steamkin lets you ramp up into things like Experimental Frenzy pretty easily. Another Runway Steamkin. All right. That's totally a thing. If I get to eat a Swift Spear here, I'm totally going to do it. I will take the damage to get a Swift Spear off the table. If they have an Experimental Frenzy, this goes south fairly easily, but let's make it so that you can't grow. Then we'll go to blocks, we'll eat you, and just stop your damage. And this is feeling like another moment where I'd like something like a board clear. Shore Crasher Elemental doesn't actually accomplish a whole lot. Tempest Djin's only going to be a 2/4, but that's better than nothing. And then I'm likely not going to be able to block these Steamkins, so I'm going to offer the trade. They're likely not going to take it, but I have to at least make the offer. Gonna need some really good draws here. Chain Whirler is kind of an interesting one. I think Standard tried playing with this for a hot second because you can just remove all the counters off the Runway Steamkin and cast it. It looks like opponent's bluffing a Wild Slash here. I'm going to let Tempest Djinn take some damage for me. It's probably correct for me to block the 4/4 Runway Steamkin. Oh, just shock. Pretty much guaranteeing that they have Experimental Frenzy in their list. Because this is supposed to be Wild Slash. It's probably Wild Slashes 5 through potentially 8. Alright, well this reeks of a Coco, but it's all we got. Opponent has nothing else going on, so we at least have Coco into Tempest Djinn and Shore Crasher Elemental. Show me what you got. Ooh, Harbinger of the Tides gets to return a Runway Steamkin back to hand and let me actually super block the Swift Spear. The Tempest Djinn can block... Actually, I think I'm just going for value here. I think I want to hit a point where top decking a Master of Waves is my best way to win this game. So, hitting a Risen Reef and the Harbinger is going to give me the best opportunity to do that. I want Coco and then Tempest Djinn. Although odds are I'm probably going to find a Fabled Passage before too long. Let's bounce one of the 4/4 Runway Steamkins. Yeah, we'll put that into play. That lets me double spell next turn. Then I want to soak 4 damage. It just doesn't benefit me much here, and put 4 in front of that. Then I get blown out by shock. Well, opponent only had the card off the top of their deck, and I'm willing to bet it's a land. Alright, dead to burn. Castle Vantress. Well, that's at least a land that isn't painful, but I think first thing I want to do is see what I rip with this. Oh, I actually can't double spell because of the forest here. Sure, that goes into play. There's a Castle Vantress. I can activate this twice and still flicker it. I think opponent has shown us that they don't have a non-creature, so Risen Reef can get in here. If they eat it, that's a bad read on my part, but I kind of have to get some damage in, and I guess Harbinger can get in as well? No, it can't. I need to leave 3 blockers back. And I'd prefer they be the 2/2s. Still super dead to burn. Alright. Came out just a little slow on that one. Let's go ahead and bring in our nice little package here. Aether Gust gets a little bit more value when they actually are running something like Experimental Frenzy, and I can just reset a Experimental Runaway Steamkin. Skew still gains life. Take out some of the grind, take out Thassa, take out some of the awkward Shore Crasher elementals. And they don't have Embercleave, which means the Harbinger's probably the last couple of trims here. I know that this hasn't been overly scientific considering played against red decks 3 times, but done something a little bit different every time. Tempest Gen, just super valuable when it doesn't die to Lightning Strike and can block a lot of their creatures. It's also going to be able to trade with the Runaway Steamkin with 4 basics. Yeah, this is okay. Likely get an Embodiment with tap land and then Skews. Then we build up to the Coco. It's also possible that I just sack the first Embodiment, depending on what we see from opponent, but I think having a couple of 0/3s is just going to slow them down a ton. Soulscar Mage, pretty good against our X3s. Tidebinder. Tidebinder actually isn't very good here because the Soulscar Mage makes it so that my fat butt creatures can't block. So I'm actually going to want to kill that. The question is, do I want to just try to fog combat here and rip a untap land? I don't think that's very likely. So I think the plan is just Fabled Passage. We will go get a island and hold out a couple of 0/3s. If they end up wanting to send a burn spell out an Embodiment, it's just one more card, and perfectly okay with that. Tidebinder also doesn't seem to do much versus the Runaway Steamkin. I don't know, maybe that wasn't the correct card here. Yeah, Tidebinder can't hit the Bomat Courier either. Alright, well, they didn't show us any burn spells to kill the embodiments, so that's at least a solid step forward. There's our island. And Risen Reef. Is Risen Reef worth the shock? Probably. If they have something to kill Risen Reef, they'll use it here, and this is also another shot at finding a land for the Collected Company. If they are holding up Wild Slash, it also means it's not going to be a prowess trigger for next turn. All right. Well, I suppose that's a backup plan for next turn. If I don't hit a land, I can just value Embodiment of Spring and go for the Tron. Ugh, so disgusting. So very disgusting. I'm actually really surprised that there hasn't been a bigger burn deck that emerged out of all of this because they have access to Eidolon, Searing Blood, Wild Slash. Like, yeah, they don't get Bolt, but they get Skewer the Critics, Light Up the Stage. Tidebinder. I guess there's actually not much incentive for me to Embodiment here. If I run out Scoos, it's just going to die because I don't have the green to activate it. I don't think that Scavenging Ooze was the correct call for sideboard hate here. Having something a little bit more like Feed the Clan. I understand we don't trigger Ferocious, but just some raw life gain is probably better. I think I'm supposed to do this. And then I can either sack this to make sure I hit Coco next turn. Opponent has 4 cards in hand. Just some more cards that they draw is more inevitability for them. I can Tidebinder here, lock down the Soulscar Mage, and make it so that Bomat can't attack unless they answer it. That probably feels like a better line. And then just hope to get an untapped land next turn. And again, if they answer this, they have to do it on my turn because this won't untap during their upkeep. So they won't get the prowess trigger. 4 mana, though. I mean, this is probably something very bad for me. Really need that 4th land. I actually just want a 4th land in Master of Waves. Is that being overly greedy? Not having targeted remover for this Bomat Courier means that I'm also likely not going to be able to beat the 4 cards that are going to be underneath it next turn. Well, there's a land. At this point, I think I'm supposed to Coco now to try to answer the Bomat Courier. No, I'm supposed to do it in their draw step. The logic being they're going to draw a card for turn, and then they either have to burn several cards out of their hand and then crack the Bomat Courier, or crack the additional 1 card out of their hand. Although I won't have Harbinger of Tides. Yep. Figures as much. Okay, well, that's another Coco. Also means I have 2 blockers for the Bomat Courier. For some reason, I was imagining that still being tapped down, so that was a mistake on my part. I guess I'm a little too used to playing with things like Knight of Autumn and Deputy of Detention. Alright, and then this is likely the turn that they cash out the Bomat Courier. I am at a fairly high life total versus the mono red deck, though, and I have a couple of really good cards in my hand, so maybe it's not completely lost, but I'm expecting this is probably just a land in hand and crack the Bomat Courier. Castle Vantress. Probably only relevant if I top deck a Shore Crasher Elemental. Wow. Super, super punished here. Yep, and they cash it out to draw 4, discarding a land. Called it. Sorry, draw step stop coming out. These Pixies are going to make it so that my Scavenging Ooze is actually a live card, though, which is super good for me. I also wouldn't mind finding a untapped green source off the top for that exact same reason. Two Soul Scar Mages means the Scavenging Ooze won't be long for the world with all the burn spells they probably drew into. Yep, and Chain Whirler's not going to get you there, although it is going to shrink my team significantly. Okay. Not really sure what that was. Ooh. Alright, I have all the mana for it. This is going to be Tidebinder. We'll tap down the Chain Whirler, although it's probably not going to stay that way for long. Master of Waves, get a ton of elementals and have Pro Red. And this is how we start to make a comeback. I'm not doing anything with the mana, so let's go ahead and send the Pixie in. And the Lord actually grew my embodiments back up to 0/3s, which is mildly relevant in this board state. They're going to have to prowess twice to be shot down in combat. And they're going to have to attack in with everything for the Master of Waves to not get wrecked here. Okay, that's a Glorybringer. Scavenging Ooze value is going to be going up here pretty shortly. Exert, kill the Tidebinder, more than likely the line. Yep. I also don't know if that's the correct line, because the 4/4 in the air is actually a respectable clock. I guess I can chump block it for 2 turns, but that was going to be a way that they had enough reach to go over the top of me. Then, now as long as they're tapped out, we get a Scavenging Ooze. I'm going to start eating their yard. Wow, that's a lot of removal over there. I guess it's going to be my yard. And as long as they're tapped down, everybody's getting in. Yeah, this is currently 16 damage, so they're going to have to trade off some creatures. I can chunk away the Embodiment of Springs. Oh yeah, they're trading their entire board for a couple of elemental tokens. Deal. I guess not running out the land there is a little loose. If I happen to draw a Risen Reef into exactly a Shore Crasher elemental, I won't have the... Actually, no, I'll have the mana for it. I'd need to find Master of Waves and Risen Reef, though, in order to get multiple card draws. I don't know, maybe between Skoo's activations and a Coco, running out the land actually might have done something. That's nice. So this should just be lethal. It's going to get the enter the battlefield trigger. I tap down the Chain Whirler, and then I can attack. And I didn't have the Shore Crasher elementals anyway, so that's fine. Harbinger of the Tides, showing us Glorybringer. Not very good versus Glorybringer. Risen Reef. I think we have to just be a little cautious about how greedy we are with this. 3's probably fine. I do like the Tricksters for being able to tap down and just prevent combat damage for a turn, but that's probably going to come at the cost of a Pixie. Actually, I think I just like this more. Again, super scientific. We played against Red 3 times, and I think I've gone into every game differently. It's usually hovering around the same 3 cards, but the ceiling on this is a turn 3 Coco, and the ceiling on this is winning the game, pointing at the Risen Reef. Oh yeah, this is awesome. So opponent's going to be on the play, which means this Harbinger is only going to be able to bounce a 1-drop or a 2-drop with haste. But then we get a Risen Reef, and they have to answer every Risen Reef. Then we get into a Tempest Gen that is going to be very hard to kill if they've burned all of our removal on our first couple of creatures here. We even drew a Coco. All right. These are the cards I want to see when I play this deck. This likely means a Runaway Steamkin or a Searing Blood. Yep. Trickster's cute. I think I'd prefer to save that for Flash, though. This is just going to be a tempo play versus a Swift Spear. It honestly isn't even that tempo because now they're going to put a counter on the Runaway Steamkin, so it's essentially mana neutral if they can hit enough spells. I am expecting to get Searing Blood here, though. So, like Swift Spear, Searing Blood. If I ever want to get a career as a fortune teller, that's my bet this turn. I don't know, potentially Trickster would have been better so I could actually Harbinger here. That was close. I mean, I'm still getting hit for 5, so not super happy Magic Christmas Land, but moderately respectable. Tempest Djinn right now, unless I rip a basic, which I don't, is only going to be a 2/4, so that doesn't feel very good. Merfolk Trickster would actually mean I don't take any damage next turn. Is that better than Risen Reef? No value? Now I want a Risen Reef here, potentially hit a land. That lets me Tempest Djinn and Merfolk Trickster next turn. And if I whiff, I can just Coco. I think I have a better next turn if I Risen Reef this turn and just throw it away. Well, we were getting set up for the uber value. That being a Pixie wouldn't have made any difference. That being a Harbinger of the Tides actually might have made a little bit of a difference. Yikes, and another Runaway Steamkin. So most of their spells are going to be mana positive at this point. I'll throw you in front of that. There's a light up the stage. It's going to give them a ton of mana, as well as card advantage. Exile, not revealed. There's a Chain Whirler and a light up the stage. So what does that mean for me? If I find another Trickster, I actually might be on double Trickster next turn just to make sure that they can't trigger this light up the stage. Actually, no, they'd be able to because they just pulled the 3 mana off this Runaway Steamkin. Okay, I don't think they thought through the combat damage there. So this is likely just going to be a Chain Whirler then? Yep, I mean, it grows the Steamkin, hits me for 1, and is a pretty respectable clock, so I feel ya. Tidebinder. I think I can still prevent all the damage to myself for their turn for that light up the stage by shocking in Breeding Pool. Tidebinder Mage, tap down the Chain Whirler, and then Trickster in at combat. Tap this down and assign block on the Monastery Swift Spear. This is sorcery, so they won't be able to kick it off at instant speed. But me shocking into play and passing is going to be a huge tell there. Me shocking into play also is pretty painful on my life total. If I just run out Tempest Djinn, I can't really block the Chain Whirler. If I just run out the Tidebinder Mage, it means I'm likely just chump blocking. Yeah, the 2 damage from the land is less than I'm going to take in combat, so I have to do that. And then I want to tap down the Chain Whirler because its damage is done. This is going to be the largest thing on the table. It's also got the most value, and then this can grow, but I might be able to cheese it out if they don't have non-combat spells, or non-creature spells. Yikes. I thought we were pretty well set up for mono red, but that Searing Blood is definitely telling me a different story. That's very hard to play around. And they're just going for the light up the stage now. They haven't made their land drop for turn, I don't believe, so... Well, they hit 2 lands. That could have been worse. Another skewer. Oh, I'm seriously at a loss for words. So I have to do this before they declare attackers. Merfolk Trickster. I'm going to. I was going to say I was going to hit the Runaway Steamkin. Yikes. I honestly don't know how they could have drawn any better out of that. I do feel like both our mono red opponents had like the god draw there. Like it was just they had everything that they needed in the two that they won. Not that last opponent, but match 3 of both of them. The Embercleave into the Thought-Knot Seer, and that one, the Searing Blood into the Lightning Strike. Like they just had the perfect cards. They wouldn't have had the mana to do that without 2 Runaway Steamkins. But either way, this was pretty fun. We only really got to trigger what we wanted to do once. This is probably just better off as a mono blue devotion deck. One of the decks that's currently in my deck queue is Narset Blue Eggs, and that's going to be using Narset Parter of Elves with Days Undoing, Leyline of Anticipation, and Flood the River. So we're going to be keeping all of our opponents' non-permanents off the table at instant speed. We're going to be forcing them to draw when they can't draw, and that's probably a better home for something like this, and having something that actually takes a large amount of blue mana with Nykthos actually feels like a pretty good home. If I want to try to break this down as much as possible, the Pixies probably are just better as golden gooses, gilded gooses. The ability to make food would have actually helped in a lot of games, and being a 1-drop that could hit any of our 3-drops actually would have been super beneficial. 1 or 2 more lands also probably would be a pretty good home. I do think that the green either needs to be completely reworked and shortened, or drop the Tempest Gens. Being a 3-pip blue spell for devotion for the Master of Waves is cute, but almost every time I cast him, I think the biggest we had him tonight was a 3/4, and that's just straight up embarrassing. Like, he's supposed to be an alt win condition. The basic islands is doable in our deck, but we do need a way to get green. There are a number of times where green was pinched, and it really made our scavenging oozes in our sideboard pretty miserable. I think that if we knew we were going to be playing mono red 3 times and we knew how bad the green mana was going to be, Scoos would have been something completely different. Just a couple of thoughts there. I do think that was a really powerful interaction. I think it's also really hard to pull off. Anytime that you're required to have devotion, something I learned in standard is if your opponent's doing anything, odds are you're not going to be able to have a big board, and if you have a big board, you're probably winning anyway. So this is kind of a cuter strategy. The green devotion deck won by going well over the top and having planeswalkers that were threats on their own as well. Shore Crasher Elemental doesn't really make the cut. And Pioneer, there's just too large of a card pool, and it barely worked the first time around. Being able to Coco into it is also pretty good, but the triple blue is a real cost, and having 8 cards that have triple blue on turn 3 and trying to be 2-color was just a little too greedy, especially when one cared about basics. But just a couple of thoughts coming from me. The deck was still fun. I enjoyed playing it. I do think that mono red was a fair matchup, but hitting it 3 times is slightly rough. I am thirteene. I do a bunch of decks for Squirrel Dealer. We have a huge backlog of stuff. My streaming schedule's over on the left if you'd like to join us while we're streaming live. Happy to answer questions, talk, hang out. Otherwise, feel free to send me any decks that are cool. I'm always keeping my eye open. I believe we're actually pushing through the Card Hoarder loan agreement, so we're going to be able to play with a couple of cards that we didn't have before. Definitely going to be looking at the Spark Double Oko list, and probably a Stoke the Flames Butcher the Horde list too, because those were 2 pretty high on my list. That the cards were just a little too expensive for me to buy just for a single fun of. But thanks for hanging out, everybody. Have a good night, and I will see you next Sunday.